All right, so I've managed to pull up your hand and mob here, and yeah, you've had a very interesting and very long career here. So I wanted to pull back to the very start. So
Yep.
2007, October 2007, you played a $3,000 tournament and you came third for $130,000.
Yep.
Now, most people who have the early days of their hand and mob, it's like, $100 buy-ins, $200 buy-ins for maybe like a couple of years, but you've gone straight into a 3K and then one for 130, and then what? Like 2 months later, you just get a first prize in $1 million tournament. Talk to me. What the hell is going on there?
Yeah, it was it was a pretty interesting start.
You are a very sporty person, and the fact that you're a PE teacher predominantly, right? I'm sure many teachers are a jack of all trades in that field, but that's been your predominant thing, hasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I did PE teaching at uni. Well, first I did a sport and exercise science degree, and then I finished school really young. I was accelerated in primary school, so I actually finished my HSC when I was 16, almost 17. So then I went to uni, as a 17-year-old, and kind of finished that as a 20-year-old. And I'm like, well, it's a little bit too early for me to start high school teaching because I'm only 2 years older than the kids. So yeah, I did some sports marketing and that kind of thing for a couple of years, and then I went into teaching as a PE teacher for was about 7 years, and then poker came along. I had 5 or 6 years off full-time teaching, and when I went back as a slightly older, not old, but slightly older teacher with dodgy knees from some rugby league injuries when I used to play. So I actually retrained and now teach maths.
Oh, you teaching maths now? Yeah.
Yeah, I teach maths. I did have one year 7 PE class this year. I put my hand up to do that to help out, just to keep me running around with the kids. I have that on a Monday morning, but yeah, the rest of my teaching load is teaching maths.
Yeah, nice, man. I mean, it's funny because like all these different things that you're putting your feet in, they all kind of just make up a poker player, don't they? Because you've got your competitiveness, you've got your your mathematical stuff, you've got your leadership stuff, which I think is a good character trait for poker. It's funny that, huh?
Well, and the other thing, I have studied psychology at uni as well, so that kind of ties in pretty nicely too.
There you go.
Yeah.
No, it's really awesome, man. It's. I was just doing a little prep for our episode today, and just looking at your journey, and it's been incredible. If I had a poker checklist of what people really want to tick off by the end of their poker career, I would say that you've pretty much done it, man. What do you reckon? You got $1 million score.
Yeah.
You've got you were sponsored by PokerStars. You were sponsored by the casino here in Sydney. You've traveled the world. You've been to Macau. You've been to Vegas. You've been to where else have you been?
Oh, yeah, everywhere. I've traveled a fair bit through Europe. So I've played in London, in Paris, in the Bahamas, all through Asia, Barcelona, Italy, so San Remo. And obviously just about every state in Australia, all through New Zealand. Played a tournament in Cebu, so in the Philippines. So yeah, I've been around a bit. Korea as well. I've won a PLO tournament in Korea, my one and only PLO trophy. So yeah, it's been a pretty cool career. Yeah.
So you're also a family man. You've got 3 kids and you're married, and I imagine that like this journey to have achieved all those things and to reflect back now and look at all the checklists we're talking about and have supported a family throughout all that time. Man, how does it feel to just sit here and reflect on all that?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate that they've been super supportive. When I first started playing poker, I started playing online and played predominantly online for 2 years before I kind of came into the Australian tournament scene. And I actually started playing online, I think it was about May of 2005, where I had a 4-month-old daughter, just one kid. I've got 3 now. So essentially, from almost the minute I became a father, a young father at the time, I think I was 25. Obviously my wife Sharon has been very, very supportive, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without her. Obviously, when you travel so much as well, with young kids, obviously it's hard to leave people behind, but she was very supportive, being able to look after the kids and extended family as well, helping her out when I've been away. So yeah, it's not easy, but yeah, it worked out really well, and wouldn't change anything.
Mm-mm. One of our trips comes to mind that you and I went on to Macau, and you
Yep,
final tabled and came eighth, I think it was, on the main event when I think it was Steve O'Dwyer that won, and Negreanu
yeah,
was on the final table. It was a
that
huge
was
event, and I'd love to.
that was Monte Carlo.
Oh, Monte Carlo. Sorry, my bad. Yeah,
Monte
yes,
Carlo.
that's right,
Yeah,
Monte
yeah, yeah,
Carlo.
yeah.
Of course, I remember because my wallet still hurts from going there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I remember on that
Yeah.
trip, I remember just seeing you, Skyping with the kids every day, and I didn't have kids, so
Yeah.
I can only imagine how hard that would have been, and to see the behind the scenes stuff on that, I kind of I feel how difficult it has been for you with all that. So I'm curious to know,
Yeah.
for people listening who also have kids of their own and they're trying to play poker and make some serious dough and make a name for themselves, what sort of I don't know, guidance would you give to those types of people?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's been times where it was super tough. Obviously, the hardest thing is getting on a plane. Once you're there, as long as you've got, like I said, a supportive spouse, supportive partner, supportive kids, and people around them at home, it can be done. You certainly do need that. Um, I think the hardest thing then, when you land and when you're in there playing, as long as you're keeping yourself busy and playing, that's the way I'd always justify it, because I was there working, and not dissimilar to if I had an office job here and I was in the city working every day. You obviously you're away from your family, but you're working. And when I was traveling, that was it. So it for me. It was always, and from traveling with me, you keep yourself busy with playing, and you don't really kind of go out and party and sightsee and that kind of thing. As good as it was to, be in some foreign places, I didn't really get to ever have a really good look around, unless if you bust a tournament early and you wait a couple of days for the next one, then I was fine with that. But I'd never really skip out on playing, because I'd feel a little bit guilty if, I'd say, well, no, I'm not going to play today. I'm just going to go out and, have a big night and, not play the next day. I never really did that, which, some people might think is a little boring, but I think it's a sensible thing to do, because then you're obviously limiting your losses and that kind of thing with, the spending. It's obviously expensive night out and that kind of thing. But yeah, I just always, obviously having a family to support as well. I'd always try and do the sensible thing and not play above my bankroll. There's been times where a lot of times in my career where I've been backed, even when I can afford to play my tournaments myself. I never wanted to put my family in any financial difficulty as well. So, I'd always sell action or things like that as well. And just making sure that you have separate you have a bankroll for poker, and then obviously it's separate from the money that you need to kind of get by and live with your family.
Mm. It sounds to me like if you to put all those in one pool, that's what I would say are the requirements to be a professional poker player. People ask you what you might do for a living, and to be a professional or to be a full-time player, they're very different things. And I mean, you even mentioned the word work in there, and I think that's something that's difficult for other people to understand. And I suppose, for me, reflecting on my own life, when you're in a relationship with someone, how you explain that to them, because from the outside, well, firstly, it's hard enough for them to understand that it's a game, predominantly of obviously luck, but there is so much skill in the long term. So when you say, "Oh no, it's work and I have a responsibility," and yeah, it'd be nice to go sightsee and everything, but really, I'm here to make the most of my opportunity. If I'm going to spend this time away from the kids and my family, then I'm going to make it worthwhile so I can bring something back for them. But yeah, that's a professional in my opinion.
Yeah, like I said, I would get guilty. There was a stage actually, where I think it was 2013, and I was traveling across to London for EPT, and there was the WSOP Europe in Paris as well. And my wife actually said, "You know what? Go and go a week early so you can actually have a look around, because there'd been plenty of times where I'd been to places and she said, "Oh, did you have a look around?" I'm like, "Nah." When you went to Barcelona, did you have a look around? I'm like, "Oh, I did like a day." That kind of thing. Or, when you're in the Bahamas, did you lie by the beach? Like, nah, not really. So yeah, there's certainly times where she said, "You know what, just go a few days early or a week early, get that out of the system, have a good look around, and then go and work." And that's what I did.
And I think, it sounds like you've been really open with your family about what you do and really clear about the parameters and the rules to make sure that you do act and behave like a professional. And I think that may probably provide security so that there's, more connection while you are away, and there's more trust there, I'd imagine. And look, reflecting back, I'm sure we're scratching the surface of what would have been a very challenging thing over, a decade of playing poker. But it sounds like that's the crux of it. So I wanted to jump in and do something different with our episode, because I was going across your Hendon mob, and it's very deep and dense, and it goes over a long period of time. And man, you've achieved some serious results. And I thought it'd be cool to actually visualize this and go through and see. I want to ask you some questions. So let me pull up my screen here, and let's just take a look at your resume, your poker resume. All right, so I've managed to pull up your Hendon mob here, and you've had a very interesting and very long career here. So I wanted to pull back to the very start. So 2007, October 2007, you played a $3,000 tournament and you came third for $130,000.
Yep.
Now, most people who have the early days of their Hendon mob, it's like, $100 buy-ins, $200 buy-ins for maybe like a couple of years, but you've gone straight into a 3K and then one for 130. And then what, like 2 months later, you just get a first prize in $1 million tournament. Talk to me. What the hell is going on there?
Yeah, it was a pretty interesting start. Like I said earlier, I was playing online for a couple of years, I guess, almost a couple of years, and winning at a decent clip, like nothing huge, but I had probably won, I don't know, 20, 30 grand up to that point, and was doing okay. My first ever, so that first result that you see, that Poker News Cup, that was actually only the third live tournament I'd ever played. And the first live tournament that I ever played was actually the Aussie Millions main event. So I'd never played a live tournament ever, and I played a 10K. And
Jeez.
I didn't just go in and say, yeah, I'm going to throw 10K in. I actually won an online it was an online free roll, which was on the old Titan Poker, which is on the iPoker skin, and it was a free roll with 130 players, one package, and I won that. Which put me in the Aussie Millions main event in 2007. And I ended up coming, I think it was about 84th, and top 81 got paid. So pretty much bubbled.
Ouch.
And then I just kind of fell in love with the live poker, live tournaments. Went down and played the Melbourne Championships later that year in, I think, about May. And then the Poker News Cup came around, and actually I wasn't going to play at all, and ended up speaking to a mate who said, and I played with him a few times, and I was actually doing some work with his son, who was a footy player. I was coaching footy, and he said, "Oh, why don't you come down and play? I'll put you in, and we'll just, if you make any money, we'll split it." So I ended up doing a three-handed chop. So that 131,000 was actually 200,000.
Oh wow, nice.
Yeah. So obviously I got half of that, so like 100 grand. And then it was we just bought a house at the time, actually, or we were just in the process of buying a house. I'm like, oh yeah, that'll help. That'll pay off some of the loan. And then in the next, I think it was so that was kind of end of October, and then I remember on the 19th of November I played a tournament on PokerStars. It was a 300 buy-in and won that for 25K. And then the very next week on the Sunday again, I played that exact same tournament, 320 buy-in, and won it for 27K. So yeah, I just went like kind of that month just went bang, bang, bang. And then the APPT series come along in Sydney, and I just decided to play a decent schedule there. I played like 4 or 5 of the lead-up events and then the main event. And Ended up just having chips the whole way through the main event, and ended up winning it. So yeah, and it
Yeah,
was
nice.
obviously it was huge at the time, because there'd been no Aussie had won $1 million playing poker in Australia up to that point. So I was the first one. So not only did I obviously have that huge score, but it also brought about all the sponsorship that came with it as well. They really kind of leveraged, the look what happened. This PE teacher from Western Sydney has just won $1 million, and that was all in the papers, $1 million Man, and it was on Sunrise and all the TV
Mm.
shows and all that stuff. So and the sponsorship was pretty much that was the next 4 years I was with PokerStars, and I think I did 5 years with Star City. So I just kind of won the right tournament at the right time.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever really like a wrong time to win $1 million, but certainly that would have come with a lot of extra endorsements. So yeah, so then after you had the massive result in Sydney and you had your $1 million score, you had all the endorsements that came with it. You started doing a lot of traveling, I imagine, and you were playing a bit online as a sponsor and everything. Talk to me a little bit about what happened after that. I mean, we went. So if we scroll up here, you did a few trips to Macau. What was one of your highlight trips here?
Yeah, that first trip to Macau was pretty cool. That was my first
This one
main
here,
trip.
2008.
Yeah, it would have been 2008. So I basically didn't do really any travel at all, apart from just down to Melbourne. Went down to Melbourne a couple of times, kind of in 2008. Then I did the World Series for the first time, 2008. We kind of did a family holiday. We took the kids to Disneyland and all that stuff. Went to San Francisco, San Diego. I didn't have any results in Vegas, but it was actually funny because we did Disneyland at the end of that trip, and there was one night so I'd been playing a fair bit online in that 6 months after Sydney, and there was one night where obviously it was Sunday night over there, so good time for online tournaments. And actually, while sitting in a hotel room in Disneyland, won the $200 rebuy on the Sunday during double guarantees week for like 75 grand, which kind of paid for the trip and then some. Even though I'd
Wow.
bricked kind of like 20, I think I bricked 20 tournaments at in Vegas without even going anywhere near a cash, and then won one of the bigger online tournaments. Right at the end of the trip while I was sitting in a Disneyland hotel. So that was a good trip. And then that first Macau trip was cool. As you know, you've been to Macau yourself. It's a different kind of place.
It's disgusting. I'm sorry to say if anyone
Yeah,
loves that place. I hate it.
yeah.
I can't stand it. Yeah.
No, I'm not a huge fan, but there were good people. There were some good people. I remember meeting a mate of mine, Michael Pedley, for the first time there, and Michael and I kind of went deepish
Yeah,
in
he
five
came
k.
eighth here. Yeah, it says
Yeah,
here he came eighth, you came 12th.
yeah.
Um, yeah, right,
And
yeah.
another mate of his, Kent Hunter, was 16th. They were good friends at the time. And then Julius Coleman, like it says there, he was still there when I busted out. So that was a cool tournament. I remember that one on day one. I think um, if I recall, had about 15 pocket pairs and flopped about 13 sets. So
That
it
helps.
was one of those tournaments where I just run up a huge stack because I just kept flopping sets, and then obviously didn't get the job done. But that was my first cash in Asia, which was pretty cool.
What was it like? So Timoshenko won that. I've played with him.
Yeah,
He's a tough
yeah,
opponent. What was it like playing with him?
yeah, it was good. I mean, I played with a fair bit. That was in his real early days where he wasn't particularly well known. I knew him from tangling with him online a little bit at the time because he was more of an online player then. I'm pretty sure like that's one of his first kind of live results. But yeah, he was tough to play with. He just always kind of had a good feel of what everyone else in the hand had, and he'd make soul read after soul read, and just like, oh, yeah, this kid's pretty good. He was probably about 22 or 23 at the time. And he's obviously had a very good and very successful career as well.
I think it was an interesting time when you reflect around. I mean, I got into poker around 2008 because that's when I turned 18, and around the 2008, 2009, 2010, I played a lot online as well, and I was coming across all these different players, and then I was going into these live situations, and you'd be like, oh, that's this guy, it's Baby Boy 212, and that's Poker Shark 444. Like you come across all these guys, and you can actually almost sense it because you can feel it in the way they play. Like it's like, oh, this guy plays really like that other screen name guy who I've been playing for years against. It's a very interesting time. I mean, I think nowadays more people are just straight into, like when you get into poker, it's like live and online same time. But back then there were a lot of purely online players, and then they surfaced when live games really boomed.
Yeah, that's right. It was, we used to be known as, the live guy or the online guy. I remember in my kind of early days, probably not really early days, but maybe like 2009 through to 2011, I was kind of the only one that was, playing live and online. So it was kind of like I was stuck in between the old school, where the kind of all old regulars that played live, and the young guys that were all younger than me. I was kind of in the middle age-wise, and was kind of the only one that was playing both. And then a lot of those guys, the young online guys like yourself and Jono and those kind of guys back then, like Ben Delaney and Steve Leonard, and those guys started playing a few more live tournaments and doing well. But early on it was your one or the other, and that was it.
Yeah, I was called the internet kid for quite some time by a bunch of people in Sydney, and I didn't feel like it really sat, so I had to make a name in the live field.
That's it, man.
All right, so let's move on here. So 2009. So I noticed a couple of times, and I noticed from just watching your career, but when I reflect back here, you've had a couple of really painful stings in the Aussie Millions main event where you got so close, but not quite there. So was this one of the? I mean, you mentioned you bubbled in the first time you ever played it, or basically bubbled, and then now this one here, 2009, you got 13th. I mean, what was that like? Yeah,
it was pretty. The Aussie Millions is pretty gross for me because that 3 times I come in the top 15 and never final tabled. So I was like 8th through 15th. And you don't get kind of that deep in big tournaments often enough to, like, you really got to make those 8ths and 12ths. Top 4, top 5. Is obviously where all the money is. 13th for 65,000. That's good money. And if anyone tells you before a tournament, at 10K, you're gonna, 6x your money, 6.5x your money, you've got to take it, right? But when there's 13 left, and looking at the names in that list, like I was sitting there thinking, well, there's a couple of solid players here, but this is not, a really, really strong field. Some of those guys there, have made a name for themselves since, and have done things since. Like Elliott Smith, no one really knew who Elliott was at the time. He hadn't had heaps of scores, but he was really good. And some other guys that just were kind of at the start of their career and that kind of thing. But yeah, that one stung a bit because it was my first real kind of major deep run in a big tournament since obviously since Sydney when I won the big one, and I really wanted that one badly, and it didn't work out. So I just lost a big flip, and that was that, which is what happens, and that's usually what decides those big tournaments, when you get down to the last couple of tables.
Yeah. I know that exactly the feeling you're talking about. It's like when you enter that tournament, you think, oh, you know what? Yeah, of course I'd take 6x my buy-in. Like, you already know that you're only about a 1 in 6 if you're a good player chance of min cashing, let alone 6xing your buy-in. But I mean, even if you come second, every poker player is still a bit bitter unless they actually get the outright scoop for first prize. Then you went on to a few years later. Where was it? I remember seeing. What was the next time you ran deep in the main event? Here we are, 2012. Yeah. And you got 15th. So pretty much the same result. So what was it like to then get another deep run, but still so far away from the
Oh,
win?
this one was a bit different because from about 60 left, I had no chips. And I
Mm.
just I was card dead and I was situation dead as well. I just couldn't get chips in the middle, and then I'd blind down to like 10 bigs and I'd double up, and then I'd sit there for a while and I just again couldn't find a spot, and I'd blind down to like 12 bigs and I'd double up, and that basically happened from I think I was all in on the bubble. You know, I won maybe twice all in on the bubble. With the best hand, and it held, and I made the money, and then but I would have been in the bottom kind of 25% chip stacks that whole tournament, even from 150 players left. So when I finally went out, I think if I recall, like I won a flip, and probably doubled through to about like ninth of 15, and then literally the next hand, I lost a flip with a medium pair. I think I had like maybe about 16 bigs, and got it in with like eights or nines against ace queen and lost. So it was just that kind of situation. Well, you know what? Like I've held in that long. If I double here, I'm probably like 4 of 15 and a decent shot. But that one I did hold out. I probably exceeded expectation from when there was like 60 players left. I shouldn't have gone as deep as I could. But that one, as you can see on the leaderboard there, Phil Ivey come 12th. I played with him for almost 2 days straight. That was really cool.
What was that like?
Yeah, yeah, it was good. It was. I remember I sat down on day two. I had a decent stack day one. I did all right. And then I sat down day two, and I had. So who was it? I think I was in like a really easy table. I'm like, I have more chips than everyone, and I literally don't recognize any person. They're all like Aussie satellite qualifiers and stuff. And the table breaks about probably half an hour into the day, and I move into, I think, seat 5 with Phil Ivey seat 6 and Stephen Chidwick seat 7. And that was not ideal. And
Not
then,
at all.
just battled.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It was just like I had some short stacks in front of me that were getting it in. I couldn't do anything, and I raised, and I was giving away position to two quality players, and I just never had it. And but anyway, it probably kept me in check a little bit. Not trying to play too many pots and that kind of thing. And ended up getting like as deep as I could, probably because I did have a tougher table and I behaved myself a little bit.
What was the major thing you learnt from being on a really tough table like that?
Yeah, probably to that point. Obviously playing in Australia a lot, you tend to have some really decent results, and you tend to, I guess I'd play more if I think I'm in a weaker field. Maybe I'll be a bit more out of line, or if I'm playing in a really tight table, I'll play loose. Or if I'm playing a really loose table, I'll tighten up a bit. This one, it was just, there's plenty of players that are better, and going to give you a hard time, and you just got to stay patient, wait for your spots. It doesn't matter if they've got 20 million in cashes; they're still getting 2 cards, same as you. And if you play solid and do the right things, then and the luck stays on your side, then obviously you're going to do well.
So it sounds like you were able just to kind of zoom in on the moment rather than go, oh, I feel Ivey's got $20 million in cashes to my 1 million or whatever you had at the time, and rather than look on that, you just thought, you know what, I'll just play each hand as best I can, and don't put myself in spots that are too unfamiliar that's going to get me like exploited here. And I think it's important for people to note that this was before the time when GTO versus exploitative was really a thing. Like that only really came around about 2015, 2016 when all these solvers and stuff started coming into play. So we're talking about a time here where the game was really evolving on everyone's different levels. And I think everyone was trying to find their level of GTO, and then people were trying to find their level of exploitative. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned, you were having all these great results in Australia, and then when you get all these international guys fly in because they hear the games are great in Melbourne, then they do play a different, very difficult style, and it does keep you in check, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, they don't know who anyone is, too, so they don't know. They've got to, I guess, which is what we should do every tournament, but not really come with preconceived notions, but they certainly don't come with, they don't know me, they don't know other players on the table, but they do think that they're better than, the players that they're playing playing with, and most of the time they are. But they can play in a style that's, not particularly great for that field as well. Like the Aussie Millions, it's our biggest tournament. It's a 10K, but half the field are satellite qualifiers, that can play a little bit kind of like scared money as well. So they really try and, I guess they'll try and exploit that. Obviously, again, not knowing who I am, and possibly think I'm a satellite qualifier as well, and trying to exploit that too. So yeah, it worked out right. I think I net result against both those guys on that day was probably positive. I would manage to jam over 3-bets, quite a number of times and stay afloat, and just lose chips in, I guess, in other ways to players that weren't as strong. But I tended to do pretty well against those two in that tournament.
Yeah, I mean, to go on what you were saying about being the unknown player, I think that's an interesting point to make, because, when they sit down, they expect everyone to know them and probably fear them, but you could come in as this unknown player who's very well established within the Australian scene, but they have no idea who you are. So you can actually kind of use that to your advantage, can't you?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So moving on here, then a couple of months later, you had a nice win in the ANZPT, a nice 5K high roller win. That was nice. What was that one like? Remember that?
Yep. Yeah, that was super
Michelle,
fun, actually.
We had him on the podcast not that long ago. There we go.
Well, look at the top three there. Like Jai Kemp's one of my better mates through poker as well. And Michelle's just a legend. So I remember that there was only, if I recall, what was it, like 25 players or something like that? Does it say there? Maybe
no, it didn't say.
But yeah, there's like 25, 27 players, something like that. And I remember we got down to 9 players left, and there was John O'Karamalikas, Daniel Nielsen, Jackson Zhang from New Zealand, who was having some good results. And I remember I knocked Jono and Daniel, the two toughest players to play against. I knocked them out on the same hand, and knocked Jackson out the next hand. So handy. I went from, it was good. So not only winning the chips, but knocking out the best two players on the table, and then knocked Jackson out the next hand. I just went from, average stack to having all the chips. So it was pretty good. And then
so give us an insight to. I mean, we've had Michelle on here. People who are listening probably listened to his episode. How did you beat him?
I remember it was actually it did go about 20-25 minutes or so. We did a little deal. I think we did a little deal 3-handed actually, and just flattened the payouts a little bit. So I think that 55,000, I might have got about 45 or something like that. But I remember, it was just small ball for like 20 minutes, and then I pulled ahead a little bit, and then I remember because not long ago I was looking through some poker photos, and I saw the photo from the winning photo that you hold your cards up, and those ones, and 5-3 offsuit. Solid hand. I'm pretty sure off the top of my head I flopped a straight, and that was that.
Nice. Yeah. I think you're holding back a bit here because you don't want to offend our lovely acquaintance Michelle. But
Michelle.
If I ask him, he'll give us a
legend.
Different story. He'll say you got lucky on him or something.
I probably did. I mean, flopping a straight after you open 5-3 off is, I mean, if that's not luck, I don't know what is. But I'm pretty sure it went down like I open, he calls with like a king high type hand. I flop the straight. And I think it just goes check, and he turns a pair and it goes in. So yeah.
You were about to say something lovely about Michelle before we move on.
Yeah, he's just a wonderful guy. And I always like playing with Michelle because he's a great guy, but he's a really good player. Really, I'd say he's easily got me. In terms of net win, net loss against a player in poker tournaments, he just seems to beat me in every hand. But he's a good fella.
I think you and hundreds of other Australian players would probably have that response. He's certainly a tough competitor, and he's got a great coach. So anyway, let's move on.
That's it, mate.
So you then had a nice run at the PCA.
Yeah.
PCA. So you've got a fifth in a 5K event, which I've been to the PCA once, and these are tough tournaments. And then you had a win in a 5K within the space of 3 days. Tell us about that. So let's go through this first one.
Have a look at that. Open up that first one. Have a look at the field there. And it's pretty.
Bonomo.
It's pretty gross.
He's no easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So even
so
like if you look at
Daniel Negreanu wins. Justin.
You got Jason Wheeler, David Baker, Sir Whites, Steve O'Dwyer. Yeah, like it was a pretty sick field. I remember actually seeing there because that was the first real kind of major overseas trip I took. I'd always just been in Australasia, and I just remember saying, you know what, I want to go to PCA, and I'd never been there, always been interested in going. And I remember sitting there, I played really, really well on day one, like as well as I played in most tournaments. I had a ridiculously tough table. A lot of those guys are on my table on day one, but I played well. I won all the hands I should have, and I think I might have, one decent flip against Dan Smith. I think with like tens against Ace Queen or something like that. Had a decent chip stack. Around the bubble. Like I was probably top 5, top 6 the whole time. I remember sitting on that final table and, with about 7 left, and Justin Bonomo was like, I think I was seat 5 and he was seat 1, and Ravi was sitting next to him. He's like, do you know that guy in the 5 seat? Because no one had seen me before. Looking around, I think he knew everyone on the table except for me, because I'd never played in Europe and I'd never played much in the US apart from World Series. And he actually looks across at me and goes, "Who are you?" I'm like, just a qualifier from Sydney. He's like, no one plays this tournament unless they actually, there's someone, they've done something. I'm like, nah, just, I want a satellite and I'm just here and I'm just, playing.
Because this is a 5K side event. It's not like a main event, right? So that's why he's probably saying, no, you don't just play this one. This is not a qualifiers event. That's the main event. This is a side event. Why are you playing this? Why are you in our territory?
That's pretty much it. And like I said, I was playing pretty well. There's some tournaments where you go deep and you think, I didn't play great, but this one I was playing really well. So he just kind of leaned over and, was kind of trying to figure out who I was.
Did he have pink hair?
What's that?
Did he have pink hair?
No, he didn't. He didn't
Not
at
yet.
the time.
Okay.
But yeah, I ended up busting to him in a pretty gross spot where, I had the best hand and he made a play and got lucky. So, which is pretty gross. I was third of 5 at the time, had a decent stack, and it was for like big chip lead pot. But anyway, it was like I said, coming 5th in that was cool. And then I actually the next day I played the 25k high roller. I won a sat for the 25k high roller and played that, and I actually bubbled that. So yeah, like stone bubble, and it was like 1.6 million up top or something like that. It was huge. So that was gross. And then I jumped into this other Six Max tournament that you've got up on the screen now.
Yeah. So 44 entries, and you managed to take this one out for 78k US.
Yeah,
so what was the difference in this one?
Like I said, I busted the 25k. And the min cash for that was 53,000. So I just lost a fair bit of equity. And I had the shits. I went back to my room, and rung home and spoke to my wife and was kind of talking through that. And then she's like, "Is there anything else on?" I'm like, "Nah, but I'm going to go over and grab a drink and something to eat." So I went back over near the poker room. I was getting something to eat, and I run into Warwick Mirzakinian, another Aussie pro, and he said, "I'm going to jump in this 5k Six Max. It's a turbo." I'm like, "Nah, not interested. I'm a bit tilted." And he said, "No, jump in. We'll have fun. We'll have a couple of drinks, and we'll, I'm like, oh, I'm not that keen to have a drink, but yeah, all right, I'll jump in. And I literally registered a minute and a half before Rego closed. And of the 44, there was only probably 28 players left of the 44 that started. And then I just ran pure, knocked everyone out, knocked out Steve O'Dwyer on the way, knocked out Mike Watson, a couple other players, and yeah, had the chip lead from about 15 left all the way through.
Yeah, nice. So I guess now you started playing a bunch of these international tournaments with some of these really big names, and I don't think a lot of Australian people would have, people in Australia, I think mostly would have noticed you playing these Australian tournaments, having these great results. But I think when you reflect back and just look at how many international deep runs you've actually had, I mean, even, over here in London, you're having a third place finish and then back at the PCA. And eventually, if we fast forward to that tournament I was talking about where we were in, or was this before in Monte Carlo where you finished
That was 2013. So the Monte Carlo one was only 3 months after those tournaments at Bahamas. Yeah.
So these guys, Steve O'Dwyer, maybe even Negreanu, and some of these bigger players, Jason Mercier, you probably would have already played with them. So they're not asking who is he anymore. They know.
Yeah, I played with some. So I played with Goran Mandic, who finished 15th. I played with Lucky Chewy, who finished 14th. I played with Vasily Fursau, so he finished 10th. And then obviously I played a fair bit with Noah Schwartz in the Bahamas. And I played with Steve O'Dwyer. I'd never played with Andrew Pantling. And Negreanu, it's funny actually, because the APPT that I won in Sydney, Negreanu did the post-event commentary on it. And if you that tournament that I won in Sydney that he commentated, I just pretty much from when there was about 6 players left, I just ran over the table and just got away with every bluff. I just barely lost a pot for like 6 hours. When I basically was short stack with 6 left, and then kind of ran over the table a little bit. And Negreanu made a lot of comments on that commentary about, Levy the bluffer, and he's all in again. And so when we actually got deep in this Monte Carlo one, he was telling everyone that I was full of shit. He's seen me play before, and I'm always bluffing. I've never have it, and all this stuff. So, which kind of sucked because I had no chips. If you remember.
Yeah, I was there. Yeah.
Yeah, on that prior to that final table, when there was 10 left, I was down to 7 or 8 bigs, and the guy that came 10th had 5 bigs, and he gets it in, and I beat him. So I go to the unofficial final table, 9 players with 12 bigs. I got a jam through, which got me up to 14, 15 bigs, and then there was a raise and a call, and I pick up aces and I shove, and pick up a bit more there. So I started the final table with 22 bigs or something like that. So I kind of just had to find a spot and go with it, and it didn't work.
So do you think Daniel Negreanu's comment about you being this bluffer, do you think that was helpful or not helpful for your game? And if so, why? I
mean, it would have been helpful had I had, I guess a little bit more, some more chips and some opportunity to play, because I just would have tightened right up and just, played all my value hands. Obviously, if I'm going to get guys that, are non-believers, then obviously, I want to have it and take advantage of that image. But yeah, also, and these guys, they're good. They're good pros. So they're not really going to listen to Daniel anyway. They're going to play the game how they see fit. But obviously, it's not going to help if anyone's going to listen to him. Then it's not, that kind of comment's not really going to help me. But yeah, it was pretty funny. Daniel's cool. He's good to play with. That final table, yeah, obviously is pretty sick. If you look at the names there, it's one of the tougher final tables that you could possibly kind of come up against.
I mean, this list is absolutely ridiculous. Even not only the final table. If you go, so we've got Steve O'Dwyer, Andrew Pantling, Johnny Lodden, Daniel Negreanu, Jake Cody, Noah Schwartz, Jason Mercier, and then keep going down. And even before then, Andrew Lichtenberger, which is Lucky Chewy, Mickey Peterson, Dario Sammartino. He's a beast. Paul Volpe. I mean, some of these guys, you did so well there. I mean, that experience alone, that would have really helped you grow for sure.
Yeah, it was funny because you make a final table of one of the biggest tournaments in the world. Like, that is one of the toughest tournaments in the world. The EPT Grand Final, everyone's there, all the good players. And then you get down to 8 players and you see that lineup, you're like, that's pretty tough beat before you even sit down, because you do expect, like, if you go deep in a tournament that does have like a decent amount of qualifiers in it, even though, the field's strong, you think of that 500 odd players, there'd be 100 qualifiers. You might get to a final table and there's a few soft spots, but at least a couple. But when I was looking around there with like 15 players left, like even John Jawanda, who we didn't mention, he's there too.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
And Victor Randon, he was 13th. Like everyone on that final table, had kind of a couple of million cashes at least. Steve O'Dwyer's got like 40 million in cashes now, or something ridiculous.
I remember at that time he was on a beast run, like he was just winning everything.
So it was cool, but it was tough. But that was an awesome trip. Obviously we roomed together. It was, I remember just dominating you in Yahtzee on the plane.
Come on, man! Do we have to go saying that? All I remember from that trip was actually you spotting out Victoria Silverstead by the pool.
Yes, I did. Yeah, that was cool. Might have got a photo or two too. But yeah, remember just coming in and we're like, we ran bad because the hotel I booked was like too far away, and then we managed to run good. Gary Gates sorted us out or Donnie Peters or someone sorted us out like a really nice hotel room at the venue. So I'm like, okay, run good, and then I go and sit in a satellite and I win a seat. If I recall, we're struggling with the actual physical euros, like how many like actual cash that we had on us for buy-ins. I'm like, oh, that sorts everything out. We don't have to worry about that now. So I won a seat in that, and then I think you final tabled something too, right? Like a 5K.
I final table, a side event, and from memory, I made a huge error, like to come 7th or something. It was a huge, just sort of like ICM high variance spot, which I don't remember exactly, but I remember being really upset about it. But I remember also at that time the W Coop was on, or Scoop was on online.
Scoop,
Scoop, and it was funny because I was playing in the room with a couple of the other guys. There was so many professional poker players in this one huge hotel, and I remember the internet dropped out. I don't know if you remember this, because I don't think you played much online at that trip.
No, that was kind of deep. Yeah, that was
right.
Like I made day 6, so it was kind of hard to play much online.
It was just the most bizarre experience because there were so many professional poker players in this one hotel, and everyone knew that we were playing online against each other, but then we'd go down and we'd play in the auditorium together. But then one night the internet cut out halfway through, and all these poker players just were walking around in their pajamas and like no shoes in the lobby trying to get reception, freaking out because we've all just disconnected. The amateur world of poker would have loved it for like an hour. All these pros just disconnected.
Yeah, it was like $200,000 or $300,000 in like dead money in the tournament, just disconnected.
Seriously, it was crazy that. But no, Monte Carlo was an experience in itself. But all right, so let's kind of skim past then. So I guess this would have been around the time where you started stepping back more into being a teacher and stepping away from the game, but still kind of playing a bit, right? It looks like you don't do a whole lot more traveling.
Yeah, so 2000 so that was May 2013 that we went. And then I did a trip to San Remo in 2014. And then I went to Barcelona. I booked to go to EPT Barcelona 2014. It must have been about August. And I was like packing my bag. It was the morning of. I had a flight at like 10, and I hadn't packed a bag about 6:30. I had to leave home at 7. And Sharon said to me, like, what are you doing? You're going to pack? We got to go. And I'm like, you know what? I don't even really want to go. And she's like, well, there's something wrong. That you don't want to go to spend 2 weeks in Barcelona playing a game that you love to play. There's some issues there. And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm done. So I took the trip. I played some cash games over there and did pretty well in the cash games, but bricked all the tournaments. But I had a look around Barcelona. It was cool. And I came home and really since then, like apart from WSOP and in Australia, I haven't really traveled, extensively anywhere else. And I may again one day, I don't know, but that was the day. Like I knew you don't want to go to Barcelona. I'd never been there before, but you don't want to go to Barcelona, then there's an issue. So, yeah.
Yeah. Tell me more about what that experience was like when you had that moment with Sharon where you were like, I think I'm a bit done here with this full time competing.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing. Like, I had those thoughts. Like, when I travel, if I was in the tournament and I was doing okay, or if I was sitting down at the table, I was okay. But as soon as I get knocked out, and it went on for a couple of years. As soon as I got knocked out of the tournament, I just kind of fell into like a little bit of a depression. Um, Not depression in the true sense of the word, but like just sadness. Like, I'm missing home. I'm away from the family. I just want to get home. While I was playing, it was okay, but as soon as I got knocked out and I knew that I wasn't working anymore, I just wanted to get the first flight out of there. And like I said, that was a couple of years, but I still looked forward to going on trips and looked forward to playing. And then the realization that, what, shit, I've got to go to Barcelona. I don't really want to go. That was kind of, a bit of an eye opener for me. And I think it coincided a little bit with, as my kids were getting a little bit older. I think my daughter was maybe nine by that stage, and so I had a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old. They were starting to, they had their sports stuff on and school things, and I felt like I was missing out on more stuff at home. Whereas when they're really little, they don't have, they don't have those commitments, and I didn't feel like I was missing out on stuff because I was there for their first words and when they started walking and talking and all that kind of stuff. But when they actually started having commitments that I felt like I was missing, it just became harder and harder to actually leave them. And also harder and harder to leave Sharon looking after that as well. Like when the kids are at home and they're younger, and she can look after them at home, it's okay. But once, one kid has to be someplace and another has to be another place, and she needs to do the school trip every day and pick up. It was harder on her, which made me feel a little bit guilty about being away as well.
Yeah, so it sounds like you really just like the kids are at that age where you feel like your time is done, where you really maximize the experience and the equity that you got back from it. But you just realize that your time was done, and I love how we can start to hear in the background the kids there and whatever's going on at home, and it's good to hear that you're back at home with your tribe, and you have been for years. And I guess I'm curious to know, as one of the final questions, I suppose, like, after that period and you felt like that, I'm done sort of feeling, do you think that it changed the way you played in that, now you still play a bit when tournaments come up or whatever, and you did for a few years, but did it affect anything? Like, did it make you less hungry? Did it make you care less? Would you feel less of that depressive feeling?
No, not, I mean, there's probably a bit more excitement about playing when I do play because I don't play anywhere near as much. So when you're traveling and you go to Monte Carlo, you go thinking, well, I'm going to play 8 or 9 tournaments. It didn't work out that way because you go deep in one, but that's a good problem to have, right? Okay, I'm not playing 8 tournaments because I'm making final table and winning €100,000. But you know that you are going to play, a decent amount of tournaments, and obviously, the more you play, obviously with variance and that kind of thing, the more opportunity you give yourself. Obviously, now only playing when tournaments come up locally, I'll have a go. Still go down to Aussie Millions. Obviously, it hasn't been on. That wasn't on this year, but I think I've played a full schedule of Aussie Millions every year from 2007 to 2020, and I'll still do that when Aussie Millions finally comes back, and when all the tournaments in Sydney are back, I tend to play them all. But it can be harder because you might, whereas in the past when you're traveling you might play 10 tournaments in a week. Now it's like might play 10 tournaments in 6 months. So and you obviously it's not that hard to brick 10 tournaments in a row. You could have 5 final tables in 5 events, or you could go 25 events without getting the cash. So, so now I take it for what it is. Like, I enjoy going and playing, but you can't put the pressure on yourself for, cashing and everything, because realistically, it's just never going to happen.
All right, man. Well, for one final question, actually, that's come to mind is,
Yep.
what would you say to yourself, like in terms of like reflecting back on your entire career? Is there anything that you would say to your younger self along the way?
Oh, that's a tough one. I guess it took me a little while to, to figure out how poker actually worked. So, going through my Hendon mob, and you see all those results like really early on in my career, and ones that aren't there. Like I said, I wanted a lot of good tournaments online in those first couple of years as well. I probably thought it was just going to continue to happen like that. It's like, I get some good results. I must be good. I'm just going to keep winning. And obviously back then it was a lot easier back then. So I probably was better than a lot of people, but now, like, people have it figured out. So I guess I just tell myself, listen, make hay while the sun shines, so to speak, because it's not always going to be this easy. You're not always going to be this successful, and you don't always, have 6-figure and 7-figure scores. So obviously the first 2 results on my Hendon mob are a 6-figure and 7-figure, and I think I had 3 6-figure scores after that in the next 10 years or whatever, which is great. Like, it's, they're not easy to come by, and a lot of players don't get them. But, from how I started, probably took me a year or two before I really figured out, well, that was an anomaly, and, you got to kind of fight and scrap as much as you can to make some money.
Nice, man. Well, look, it's been a pleasure to sit here and reminisce over your career, and it's been even more of a pleasure to watch your career unfold, because really you and I got into it around the same time, and to have shared some of the experiences with you firsthand and also see it. I'm impressed. I just want to commend you for your ambassadorship of poker. You've been an absolute leader and amazing person on off the felt. And I speak for the rest of the Australian poker community when I say that thank you. You've done a great job. You've inspired a lot of us. You've probably knocked a lot of us out of tournaments, but we appreciate you, man. So yeah, it's been awesome.
Thanks, Brendan. I appreciate it too, mate. You've been a good mate through a lot of it. We've had some good times. I remember one trip to Queenstown where you turned up and as a 20-year-old to play, and the age limit was 21. That was pretty amusing. But yeah, you've done a great job as well, and same goes. You led from the front. You're always a really positive person, which in poker, those people are few and far between. So for me, I've always enjoyed catching up with you and having a chat and traveling with you when we did, because you don't have that negativity and that kind of thing, which is really important in poker, because just about every tournament you play, you're going to be disappointed. So to be around positive people, I think is really important.
Awesome, man. Thank you. Well, it's good to see you, and good, thanks for coming on here and sharing yourself like an open book. So we appreciate it.
Cheers, man. All the best.